Hello and welcome to the Life Burst podcast. We're going to be talking about Piruluk today. So Piruluk is a interesting deck in that it is definitely a full discard deck. We've talked about Ray, or we'll talk about Ray, where it is not the discard. It's basically that it's tempo and enables discard, right? Where this is discard that enables tempo. So it's a little bit opposite. This deck relies more on the tempo aspect, or sorry, the discard aspect than most other of these blue decks do. In order for it to function, it basically needs to have discard built in to it. So because of that, we're going to inevitably choose to go more a blue-black route than a blue-white route with this. Let's talk about what the card itself actually does. This might be the first time some of you guys have heard of Piruluk. Piruluk, I believe, is the protagonist of the second Wixoss series in the second season, and that's Piruluk. It does the following: it's a level 3 blue with the auto ability of, at the beginning of your attack phase, if there is at least 3 or more cards in your hand than your opponent's hand, target one signet on your opponent's field. It gets a negative 3,000 power till end of turn. If there is at least 6 or more cards in your hand than the opponent's hand, the signet gets negative 6,000 power instead. Its enter ability is draw 2 cards, which helps basically feed that auto ability, at least on the turn that it comes in. And then its actions for once a game is you can declare a number that is lower or equal to the number of their center L rig, look at the opponent's hand, and then discard all signi without guards whose level equals to the declared number. So let's talk about that. That's basically her signature ability from the anime, by the way. It's called Peeping. It's pretty good, but there's ways that you can make it so it's statistically better, right? Most decks that you're going to play against is going to have the following breakdowns in their deck composition. They're going to have, if it's an aggro deck, generally speaking, they will have 18 level 1s, 10 level 2s, and then some number of level 3s that can be anywhere from 8 to 12, right? So in those aggro deck matchups, you are probably going to name 1, right? Even without the guards, because we've got to imagine that the guards take away 4 cards of your level 1s in your opponent's hand, right? That means that there's 14 cards there, which means that very likely they have more level 1s in their deck than they do level 2s and 3s. There is something to be said about, well, Andrew, they use their level 1s and level 2s earlier on, so maybe they don't have those in hands, and you'd be kind of right on that. But at level 3 and 4, you start like... and remember, this is once a game, so you can actually do it later in the game if you want to hold off on it. By the time you do this, and I suspect you'd be doing it level 3 because you're trying to get the most bang out of your buck and get the most cards out of their hand, you could do it level 4, or turn 4, I should suppose. But I wouldn't... Unless you're going for the killing turn on turn 5, I probably wouldn't do it that late in the game because they might just be spending out all their cards in hand. Also, you got a fair amount of discards, so they might have no cards in their hand at that point. You start playing your level 3s on turn 3. So you're going to want to wait for your opponent to be level 3 before you do this. And at that point, generally speaking, most people play their turn 3 as a 3-3-1 most times. A lot of times, I think it's a valid choice against this deck specifically, if you look at it, to maybe play out your level 2s instead of your level 3s, just so that way you have more of a mix in your hand. If the opponent's playing smart like that, you're always going to kind of hit the same number anyways, so there's really no way around it. You're going to get some amount of discard, and really, if you're making them discard 2 cards with your action, you're on par with Madoka at that point, so it's pretty okay. I think if you're playing against an aggro deck, they are going to have probably around 14 level 1s. You can count up the stuff in their enter and their trash and make some math in your head. But generally speaking, yeah, you can just count the levels that they have in their enter as well as their trash and make that decision. If you're playing against a more controlling deck, a more late game deck, I should say, that number split ends up usually being 16, 8, 12. And a lot of those decks will also play some amount of spells, like 4 to 6 spells in the deck. So that's going to lower that number of probably 3s and 2s out. So personally, if you're playing those types of decks, at that point I would decide to either calling 1 or 3 is the right option, and you'll have to make that decision based on what's in their enter and what's in their trash. So you'll have to make that call at that point. Overall, you're probably going to hit 2 cards with your once a game action ability if you go with that route, which is pretty good, and that's going to enable you to probably start to get at least consistent negative 3000s. And with the added discard support that you have in the deck, there's a high chance that you can get negative 6000 as well. The thing is, and this is the reason why Ray is a double white deck, and this is a double blue deck with a splash of black, is it matters more about keeping the cards not in their hand, right? And so you can't use white because there's too much bounce effects in white for you to justify using white right now. You need to get rid of it, and you need to gotten rid of. One of the other ways that you can also enable yourself to get that negative 6000, even if you can't get the opponent's hand size down, is you can get your own hand size up. That's something that this deck does very readily to enable it. So you'll see that we're going to be pairing this with the Elrig deck with Tamago Jetstick and Tamago Double Stroke. This allows us to just get lots of cards, right? This is a little bit defensive. We don't have a 3-stop, which kind of sucks. But this is just a little bit defensive. If you wanted to swap this out with Madoka in order to get yourself a 3-stop, it's a very valid strategy. Personally, I just decided to go with the Tamago in this scenario. I also kind of don't always want to play Madoka every game. I think Tamago Jetstick is actually quite strong. And again, this is one of the ways that you can make sure that you'll always have more cards in your hand than the opponent. And then you'll have Machina Wing Slash and Machina Smash. Another ways to get yourself more cards in hands. There is some validness in playing Machina Smash on the main phase if you ever need to do that to enable this strategy. Again, this is just consistency. I know we see it over and over and over again in Wixoss, so it's really quite good. We're playing a lot of level 1s that are very, very strong. So we end up having a really good use case for Machina Wing Smash. To back it up, we're also going to use what we're primarily going to use the cards in hand, since we're going to overfill our hand often, is we're going to be using it for Garden of Singularity. Since we have a very valid method of bringing cards to our hand, drawing extra cards, we don't need to worry about being down too many cards of Garden of Singularity, which, by the way, basically just says that we get to draw a card, and then for the rest of the game, we have constant. You may discard 3 cards from your hand instead of discarding 1 card with guard, and you can guard with it. So you basically discard 3 cards to guard. This isn't better than guarding, by the way. That's still why we run 4 guards. But it does consistently give you an out to always having guard on turn 1 and 2, which matters because those are the turns that not having the guard hurts the most. But you can pair it with things like, for example, Tamago Jetstick, where you draw 2 cards, down something, and then you discard some of those cards to Garden of Singularity. Again, the valid method of drawing more extra cards. This is Summer Lives Blues allows us to open a lane while also drawing more cards. So we've got a lot of cards in here. You'll basically find anything you need to find in this deck. Baphomet allows us to have a consistent level 1 with power 7000. You might say, well, how are you getting that? Well, the truth is, you can Baphomet out, then find yourself a Baphomet being milled, Machina Wing Slash a Baphomet back, play the second Baphomet, boom, you've got 5 cards in your trash. You're also playing some amount of random drains, so you could play Baphomet, mill 3 cards, random drain the opponent, that plays 1 card and also puts a card in your trash, that being the random drain. Boom, you've got 5 in there. This deck really consistently pulls out Baphomet. The other way that you can do it is we actually play 2 Sui here. Sui paired with the Baphomet allows you to put 2 cards in your trash. Paired with the Baphomet, that'll get you your 7,000. It's a little weird to put out a 2,000 and a 7,000, but it's better than nothing. So you can do that as well. I've decided to play more Hakat here than Sui. I don't need the filtering effect, and I'm not turning on anything with the discarding. The only trash things I'm really enabling is Baphomet and Machina, so I don't need to do this effect more than I want Hakat in this deck. Hakat will let me filter, and then I can draw the cards that I need to draw, because I've got so much natural draw in this deck anyways. So I guess there's also Husui does affect Modem, which we'll talk about in a second. So I think Sui's pretty okay in this deck. It's just mostly there as a Baphomet enabler. But like I said, we've got the Hakat here to filter through all the cards in your deck, find the things that you need to find, then draw those cards pretty naturally. With our level 1s, and then our last level 1s that we're going to be using is Futase here. Futase's ability says if we have more cards in our hand than the opponent, which we're trying to do, this gains shadows level 2 or less on your opponent's turn, which is pretty good. We're not playing Zhao Yun here, but this is a kind of a deck that actually would like to play Zhao Yun if it had the ability to. Its life burst is pretty fantastic. It disables an Elrig or a Signy attack. If the opponent can't discard 3 cards, we're going to be making them discard a bunch of cards, so hopefully they can't discard cards, and we'll be able to win off of that. Thrilling is just a great way to get ourselves some extra card draw and enable that negative 6,000. Again, our negative 6,000 isn't how we're winning the game, but it's definitely helping us win the game. Random drains help us with that as well. It makes sure that we maintain hand size, as well as putting our opponents down a card. And then actually what I decided to do was put 2 Trouble here. This could be Animirage, I suppose, if you wanted it to be Animirage. And I wouldn't besmirch you for putting the Animirage in here. I actually like the Trouble in this deck. Again, I feel like we want especially if you swapped this out for Madoka's, then I would keep the Troubles in 100%. Because that will allow you to pretty consistently Madoka clap, and the draw 3 is pretty good, and the life burst is very fantastic. Again, we're also running the Folklore life burst here, and this is basically Folklore life burst minus the draw card. I think Trouble is criminally underrated and underplayed in America. I think it's very, very good. I think it helps you. It's not an early game card, but it helps you late game against these discard mirrors, and that's really what you're going to be worried about. You want to be winning the discard match, and you want to be winning the card advantage race, and having Troubles in your deck will allow you to do that. But it doesn't allow you to auto lose to aggressive decks, because you've got the down 2 Signy's life burst, and with 6 ways to down 2 Signies, you're at least guaranteed to see 1 per game with your life burst. That's sort of how the math works out. So it ends up being pretty good. Your other access to removals is going to be Modem, which is a free removal. I mean, again, we're playing 8 spells in this deck. You're going to find ways to discard, to put 2 spells from your trash into your exile, right? And then that'll give negative 6,000. If you're pairing that with your negative 3,000, you probably can remove 8,000. So you're going to hit most level 2s and below. If you are pairing it with the negative 6,000, that's again 9,000. So that's pretty good. I'd say that's pretty good. The last thing in the deck, aside from Phalaris, is going to be your ZRO2. Again, you've got so much draw power, you don't need a ton of removal in the main deck to always consistently find your removal. And ZR is just going to do a lot of work for you here, making it so that way you'll be able to just do more negative stuff, right? Negative 8,000 plus negative 3,000 is negative 12,000. That's your lucky number. You can basically get rid of everything with that. And the fact that it can make your opponent discard cards at random or draw you cards, meaning that if the opponent doesn't have cards, you can still use this to have 6 or more cards than your opponent to get that negative 6,000 that you're looking for. It's very good, is what I'm trying to say. It's a solid card. Use it. Feel happy about it. And the last card is you got a Phalaris. Phalaris is pretty much a one-of in any deck that you're running Machina Wing / Machina Smash into, and you have ways to turbo through your deck, as we have so much draw cards, especially discard cards here. So you'll find it, and it will be very good in the deck. It helps with your damage output as well, and again, like I said, consistent because you've got the Machina Smash to bring it back. So that's the deck. I think it's quite strong. Again, I would rate this one C+. I think this and Ray are pretty strong in the meta. There are also more discard options if you don't want to play the Tamago anymore. Is the Tamago better deck than this? I think, yes. I think it is better. I think Tamago is probably a B tier, if not an A tier deck. Probably an A tier deck. This probably is closer to a B tier deck. I'll do an official tiering breakdown later. So I like this quite a bit, and I think if you wanted to spice up your choice of what discard deck you want to be playing, I think this is a very valid one.